Welcome back to our next episode of Watson Drops. I'm Kirby Dolak of LCTV, and today we're back again with Littleton Water Department Superintendent Corey Godfrey to discuss the status of the new Taylor Street well and the synchronicity of how the use of that well will positively affect the water supply and the future of two communities. Corey, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Kirby. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Corey, can you give us a bit of background about this water project and an update on the Taylor Street well project?
Sure. Yeah, so I think I was here back in the fall for an episode, and at that time I had described a test well that was installed in 1986 on the then digital property off of Taylor Street. When Amazon moved into the property at 153 Taylor Street, 58 acres was donated to the water department, and all of the necessary testing and permitting for that well was completed this past fall and winter. And so we've now begun the engineering and design of the well and the associated pump station and transmission main that will be installed to bring that water back to the new Whitcomb Ave Treatment plant, which will significantly increase our available water supply. So, for example, the initial permit that we'll get for that well will be for 500,000 gallons per day.
We've seen time-lapse photography of that plant being built. So what's the tease here? When is that plant scheduled to open over on Whitcomb Ave?
Yeah, it's a good question. It would be next month. I mean, construction's just about complete. Unfortunately, with some supply chain issues, we're still waiting on 24 PLC cards to be delivered. So PLC cards are like the brains of the treatment plant. They're computer components that you can't run the plant without them. So while everything else is just about ready to go, we do have to wait for that supply chain issue to be resolved. I'm guessing it'll be sometime later in the summer.
Are those chips manufactured in the U.S. by chance?
Those are not. No.
I was going to say it'd be a great road trip, Corey. We'll go get them.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay. So I understand that the town of Boxborough may also be served by this new water source. Tell us about that whole history there, because there seems to be quite a bit.
Yeah, we've been working with Boxborough for several years now, really just, meeting with them and helping them to evaluate their options for solving a drinking water contamination problem that they have west of Route 495 in their town. So it's a relatively limited area of the town. So Boxborough does not have a municipal water supply, but virtually all of the small water systems serving the 1,000 or so residents in the condominiums west of Route 495 are contaminated with road salt and PFAS. Up until the recent Taylor Street well developments, we didn't have enough capacity to provide, the specific group of Boxborough properties with water. But now that we have that Taylor Street well coming online, that changes everything. It changes the whole picture and our ability to help out there.
So how much water does Boxborough need, and what benefit does that also provide to Littleton? Because it's like, well, we're giving them water, but how does that benefit Littleton?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. This is one of those rare circumstances in life where everybody wins. It's the synchronicity you mentioned in your intro. So Boxborough only needs 65,000 gallons per day to solve their public health crisis in that 495 area. That's only 13% of the 500,000 gallons per day that will be permitted for to take out of that new Taylor Street well. And if that well on its own, if that would cost the Littleton water users $11.1 million after paying the full construction costs over the life of a 30-year loan at today's interest rates of around 5.5%. But if we combine that well development project with an extension of our water system into that specific Boxborough area by laying 4.5 miles of new water main to serve those Boxborough customers, then the project becomes eligible for a 0% interest rate loan from the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. That's just like the loan that we had taken out for our Whitcomb Ave water treatment plant. The new Boxborough customers would pay for all of the costs to install the water main extension, as well as 13% of the cost of the new well pump station and transmission main, since they'd be using 13% of that water. Plus, Boxborough water users would pay connection fees to the Littleton Water Department. So between the connection fees, the 13% of the well costs, and the 0% interest loan, that $11.1 million cost comes down to an even $3 million. So that's obviously a huge cost savings and major benefit to Littleton's ratepayers.
Wow. I got to say, that sounds like a great deal. Now, I can see why the water department has been pursuing this project so aggressively, given the attractive funding that has occurred there with the DOT and DEP. Can you tell us how those owners of Boxborough's private water systems feel about all of this? They've got to be happy.
Yeah, as I said, this is a rare situation where everybody wins. I just described the significant financial benefits to Littleton. For Boxborough, over 1,000 people who happen to have the lowest median incomes in Boxborough would now have access to a clean, safe, and reliable source of drinking water. And it comes at no cost to the town of Boxborough itself. Those costs would be borne by the water users in Boxborough. But if this project were not to come to fruition, then all of those affected people and their condo associations, they're still going to be required by Mass DEP to get rid of the contamination, and that means installing their own private water treatment systems. And this wouldn't be a very cost-effective solution. As you can imagine, having 11 different small treatment plants built in Boxborough would be far more expensive than just getting their water out of our treatment plant that we're already building. DEP doesn't want to make them do that. They prefer to see a municipal water supply serve those customers. DEP has been at the table as a partner the entire time, starting right from the planning process to help create a workable, scalable solution for this project. And they're excited to see this water extension project succeed. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation, or Mass DOT, is also a critical partner in the project. They benefit from the project because it solves a problem caused by the road salt contamination identified in many of these small water systems. And like DEP, Mass DOT is excited to see the success of this project, to the extent that they will be kicking in $6.5 million to help offset the Boxborough costs and relieve themselves of any future liability due to that contamination.
So is there any chance that the Boxborough requirements of 65,000 gallons per day could turn into a higher amount of water over time?
No. So as for that 65,000 gallons per day ever being exceeded, we're currently negotiating an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Boxborough that clearly defines the amount of water we're willing to provide. And this will be further defined in general legislation that we're ultimately seeking. So the processes and mechanisms for us to collect betterment and connection fees for Boxborough water users will get defined in this IMA and then later in the general legislation.
Help me understand what you mean by general legislation. Is the nature of this intermunicipal services agreement that's being offered requiring special legislative solution?
Yeah, so the IMA allows us to proceed with the design and construction of the project. But in order to effectuate the process of collecting betterment fees, from one town to another, the general legislation will be needed. So that's a little bit different than special legislation, which we've sought in the past. Special legislation is like a home rule petition where there's a town meeting vote and it goes to the legislature and eventually usually gets approved. General legislation is a little bit different. We don't need to have a town meeting vote and then submit it to the legislature. We just work directly with our legislative delegation, and they bring forward, the proposal for this new state law, essentially, that defines how Littleton Water will collect betterment fees and connection fees from Boxborough customers. What
legislators have you been working closely with on this particular initiative, Corey?
Yeah, so we've briefed Senator Jamie Eldridge, Representative Jim Marciero, and Rep. Senna from Boxborough's district. They've been to several of the larger meetings that we've had to talk about this project, so they're fully aware and supportive of the project. And so we'll be working with them even more closely now, once we get the IMA established, to begin writing that general legislation and introduce that.
So aside from the uniqueness in crafting that required legislation to support this relationship, it really does sound like nothing but upside for both communities. Tell us what the next steps are to make this project a reality in both municipalities.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've already applied for and been approved for the 0% interest loan from the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. So now we just have to secure the borrowing authorizations. Water Department has a warrant article for a water infrastructure project that we'll be presenting for appropriation at Littleton's May 1st annual town meeting. The water infrastructure project is seeking a $19.2 million borrowing authorization to construct the Taylor Street well, build the pump station and transmission main to our Whitcomb Ave plant, and extend our water system into Boxborough. So as I mentioned, Littleton will ultimately only ever pay a net of $3 million on this loan, and the rest will be recovered from Boxborough customers via betterment fees and connection fees, and Mass DOT's $6.5 million contribution. So that $3 million is compared to the $11.1 million we would have paid for the, if we just did the well, pump station, and transmission main on our own. But based on those numbers alone, I think most Littleton and Boxborough residents will agree this is the right financial thing to do. Never mind the fact that it's the right thing to do, in helping people who have really no other option to obtain clean, safe drinking water.
Well said, Corey. Well said. We understand that LELWD or LWD is hosting a public forum April 25th, 7 p.m. at the Littleton Police Department Community Room. That'll be televised and streamed in both Littleton and Boxborough communities simultaneously. As you plan for this process, do you plan to talk about the details that you've shared with us today and also answer questions? Tell us more about the event, Corey.
Yeah, we'll be discussing two important projects at that public forum, along with their associated town meeting articles. So first, we'll provide an update on the Littleton Common Sewer Project and the need for additional borrowing authorization there. And then second, we'll be discussing this Taylor Street well and Boxborough Water Main Extension Project and the borrowing authorization we'll be requesting at town meeting. And we'll obviously be happy to answer any questions the public may have at that time.
Corey, is there anything else you can think of at the moment to describe and talk about that Warrant article or other items of importance or projects updates?
I think that covers it for the moment. We'll have a little more details at that public forum. And like I said, have the opportunity for people to ask questions and get those answered.
If they have questions that they want to submit, can they use the LELWD's info contact information? Is that how you folks would like it done?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have questions that you want to submit ahead of time, info@lelwd.com is a general email address you can send those to, and we'll make sure to have answers for those questions at the forum.
Well, we want to thank Corey Godfrey, Littleton Water Department Superintendent, for coming in today and explaining the status of the Taylor Street well and the Boxborough Water Extension Project that will positively affect both towns' water supply and safety. Corey, we wish you a positive outcome at Littleton's town meeting on May 1st, and we encourage everyone watching to attend that meeting, that in participating, it's the purest form of democracy by getting out and voting for the future growth of Littleton. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kirby.